Hello?
All right. Good, everyone, and good morning for those of you on the other side of the country. Thanks so much for joining us today. I'm Melissa Neal at the Gaines Center, and we are really excited to bring you a webinar today about assisted outpatient treatment. Next slide, please. I have just a couple of housekeeping items I want to cover. First, this disclaimer: the views, opinions, and content expressed in this presentation do not necessarily reflect the views, opinions, or the policies of the Center for Mental Health Services, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, or U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Next slide. Reminders: if you look to your panel, you will see a chat box option. So I encourage you to submit questions via chat in the Q&A pod, submissions in the Q&A pod, and at the end of our presentations, we'll be addressing as many of those questions as possible. So as arise throughout the presentations, we will not be taking time during the slides to answer questions. So please submit those as you think of them, and we'll cover them at the end of the presentation. We're recording this webinar. Next slide, please. Brief overview of our agenda. We are excited to have Miriam Chase here from SAMHSA, who will be providing some opening comments. We'll provide an overview of AOT, and then we'll dive into the 7 habits for effective AOT judges. I'll be closing with some discussion, as I just mentioned. Next slide. I'm going to turn it over to Miriam Chase with some opening remarks from SAMHSA.
Hello, my name is Miriam Chase. As she said, I am the lead government project officer for the AOT grant program. On behalf of SAMHSA and the Center for Mental Health Services, I also want to welcome you and thank you for joining us for today's webinar. This is critical as judges have such an important role in the assisted outpatient treatment, which is referred to as AOT. So I'm very invested in supporting AOT as another option in the continuum of behavioral health services available to treat people with severe mental illness. It currently funds 17 grantees who are implementing and evaluating AOT programs across the nation and are providing helpful insights into opportunities and barriers to AOT. Opportunity takes place in the learning that are part of the civil commitment process. We have a unique position as officials who weigh a person's right and needs for treatment and in a determination that may impact the person's civil liberty and freedom. If a court order to treatment is deemed necessary, judges may use the hearing to help the individual understand the reasons for the court order, the interest of the court and partners in the individual well-being, and the critical nature of the court order. This webinar will hopefully help support judges in implementation of effective AOT programs. Our AOT program is somewhat different and shaped based on the statutes, with habits or so that any judges can practice them regardless of the structure of their program. Our hope is that in incorporating these habits in their everyday work, AOT judges will play a meaningful part in the recovery process of every individual receiving AOT services. Thank you again for taking the time to learn and incorporate this important information in AOT programs.
Much, ma'am. And so I'm just going to briefly introduce our 3 panelists for today's presentation. First, we have Brian Stetton with us, who is the Policy Director at Treatment Advocacy Center, and he has been very much involved in the formation and implementation of AOT, both in New York and across the nation. So we are excited that he is a consultant with us, with the AOT program, grant program that Miriam mentioned, and he will be presenting today as well. Next. Stormer is joining us from Summit County, Ohio, and she has been on the bench for 26 years, currently serving as a probate judge, but has had a variety of experience in handling both civil and criminal court cases. And she is very much involved in treatment courts and is now presiding over their New Day Court, which is overseeing the civilly committed in outpatient treatment. Tim Russell is joining us from Baldwin County, Alabama, and is a probate judge there and is navigating challenges of a very fast-growing county with changing demographics. And so he also is presiding over hearings for their outpatient, their assisted outpatient treatment program. And now I'm going to turn it over to Brian Stetton to provide an overview of AOT in case you're familiar with that program.
Hey, good morning / afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. As Melissa said, my name is Brian Stetton. I'm the policy director for an organization called the Treatment Advocacy Center that works around the country to remove barriers to the treatment of severe mental illness. And promoting the establishment of AOT programs, assisted outpatient treatment, is a very big item on our agenda. And I just want to say, anyone who is inspired by anything you hear today to want to get a program like this started in your community or have questions about the way AOT is being practiced in your community, I'm easy to find through the Treatment Advocacy Center website, so I hope you'll get in touch with me. So AOT, Assisted Outpatient Treatment, this acronym you've heard a number of times already on this call. What is it? First and foremost, assisted outpatient treatment is a legal mechanism to help people with severe mental illness who struggle with engagement to treatment on a voluntary basis, often due to a lack of insight about their illness. Many other reasons, of course, come into play. But we're talking here about folks who get stuck in the revolving doors of the criminal justice system and of the mental health system, individuals who rack up staggering and really heartbreaking numbers of hospitalizations and arrests in a short period of time, largely because of their inability to engage in the community-based treatment services that are made available to them. And what we're trying to do here with AOT is to help these folks engage in prescribed treatment in the community, live the kind of lives that all of us want for ourselves and for our loved ones, and avoid these patterns of repeated hospital and arrest. Technically speaking, is a form of civil commitment. We are familiar with the more common type of civil commitment where a person is committed to a hospital based on a finding that the person is currently a danger to themselves or others. With AOT, we are committing a person to not to a hospital, but to follow a specific treatment plan in the community, not based on a finding that the person is currently dangerous and is in need of hospital care, but rather on a finding that this is a person who's actually able right now, at the moment they come before the court, to survive safely in the community if only we can keep them engaged in treatment. And so based on such findings and also a finding that a person is unlikely to survive safely on a purely voluntary basis, based on evidence of their history, the court under AOT will impose an order that person engage in services. And at the same time, it is committing the system to the patient. That is, the court order will generally incorporate a specific treatment plan, and is not only saying to the individual, here's what we expect of you, but also saying, here's what you have a right to expect of the treatment system. These services are going to get delivered to you, and the court is going to make sure through its supervision that that happens. Currently, all but 4 states have laws authorizing this type of civil commitment, outpatient commitment, or AOT. But when we talk about AOT, we really mean more than just this legal mechanism. If you look at the state laws, you will see this law on the books that says you take this approach in specific cases. But what we're really talking about here is a program that makes the maximum use of this legal authority within a jurisdiction to identify all the individuals who live there who are in desperate need of this intervention in their lives, bring them before court, store these orders, and then provide all the services that the individual needs and make decisions at the end of the court order as to whether it's clinically appropriate to continue the person under AOT or whether that person has developed these habits of treatment compliance that allow them to graduate from the program, as is usually the case. So this is very much a collaboration or a partnership between the court system and the treatment system, and we're going to focus in this call on the court's role in that, and the elements that allow a judge to practice this to maximum effectiveness. And in the process, I think we'll talk more about some of the other partners that the court is going to work with to make this happen. But hopefully that gives you enough of an opening sense of what it is specifically we are talking about today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stetton. So that everyone on the call can understand how we arrived to these 7 habits, because prior to starting to plan for this webinar, these 7 habits weren't necessarily listed out anywhere. So the Gain Center convened a group of AOT judges along with Mr. Stetton, and really went through a process of determining what would the 7 most effective habits be, and we received input from AOT judges who are implementing AOT in their communities today. So these are the 7 habits that rose to the top, and in the subsequent slides we will have our participants, our panelists, sharing more information about each. So the first one is self-educate on medical and psychiatric treatments and side effects. The second habit is a personal connection with AOT participants. But is understand and clearly communicate the roles and responsibilities of the AOT team members, including the judge, court, the rural health provider, and the participant. The habit, create a court environment that is supportive with clear expectations of all parties. The fifth, encourage participants to actively engage in their treatment with the goal of recovery and independence. The habit, praise successes, no matter how incremental. The habit, the procedures for consequences for non-adherence to AOT treatment plans. And so I'm going to turn it over to Judge Stormer, who is going to go over habit 1.
Hi, good morning. I'm Eleanor Marsh Stormer. I am a judge in Summit County, Ohio, whose county seat is Akron. Now I'm actually in Denver, Colorado on vacation, but this is so important to me and so meaningful in my life that I wanted to be able to participate even though I'm not quote-unquote working. So I've been involved with mental health court type of activities for about 17 years, and I think whether you guys decide to move forward with a full-blown quote-unquote AOT court, you can use some of the things that we're going to be talking about in any situation in which you have someone before you with a serious mental illness or any other mental health issues, including behaviors that might be related to trauma. Y'all are certainly aware that people with mental illnesses come in and out of our courts a lot. I was a municipal court judge for about 13 years and saw a lot of different people initially who we just couldn't figure out what to do with them. We had no tools. People fighting the Korean War. We had people getting ready to build buildings. We had people who were on side corners and beating up people who wouldn't listen to them, but we didn't really have anything in place to help them start to move forward. But we did start a mental health court. We started a drug court because there was an overwhelming problem with crack cocaine. That began in our county in 1995. And it's very instructive because we learned that about 10% of the people we were seeing who had serious drug problems also had serious mental health problems. Obvious that we couldn't keep them in the same court. I had a guy come in one day with a bucket. In the bucket was a series of papers. He was going to deliver them to me. He was quote serving me with these papers by handing me this bucket. And there was a room full of drug addicts there who were all laughing at the guy. And he was dead serious. I was a bit confused because I've been handed a bucket of papers before. I've used a lot of different things in these papers. It became clear that drug addicts, everybody wants to feel a little bit better than somebody else. And in this case, they wanted to feel better than the mentally ill guy. It did not look very therapeutic for him. So we started to separate out a mental health court, which is a criminal court for people who've been arrested. And that was the first time in 2000 that we began to have tools to deal separately with people who presented with a serious mental illness. And again, were people who had been charged with crimes. We had the ability to take medication to bond. Medicine, I can let you out on bond. And we know just because you're mentally ill doesn't mean you're stupid. So people could understand the consequence of, hey, if I take my medicine, I can get out on bond. If I take my medicine, leave me alone. Our focus in that mental health court, of course, was just to keep people from being arrested. And it continues to this day under other judges, and it is working in doing that. Our encouragement was stay on your meds, you don't get arrested. We did have other case support in place. But it'd be pretty clear that there was a piece missing. We did want people to get arrested. We want them to arrest in the first place. I had an assisted outpatient treatment program in effect with a civil commitment to a mental health agency, to our local board, which pays for these services. People were placed on it, and we did have assertive outpatient recruitment of participants. They provide housing. They would go under bridges and try to get people to come in. So we had a community mental health provider, and we had a system where they could be committed to the board, but there was no judicial oversight. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later in this program. We did have crisis intervention trained officers, or CIT officers. We changed that process so that if first responders encountered someone with a serious mental illness, they have the option of taking them to a psychiatric emergency service as opposed to jail. However, it was not really used very well. It began to be used more and more in the intervening years between 2000 and 2016, but it was still resulting in a lot of different arrests. And the time that I was a judge from a mental health court judge was that there was a piece missing, and I think AOT, civil commitment program with judicial intervention is that piece. And you can say to yourself, well, if we have a court, we deal with crimes, why can't we just let someone else take care of the problems? Why isn't the mental health system doing a better job? And I don't know the answer to that question. I just know that sometimes that's not enough. And with terrible situations like you see in the Waffle House, where a guy who is struggling with mental health issues suddenly shows up at the Waffle House. So I think the missing piece for us has been judicial oversight, assisted outpatient treatment. Is it going to solve the problems? It's not going to solve all the problems, but I think it can be very, very helpful in solving some of the problems. To be effective in that role as judges or people involved in this system, we need to know about the problem that our people have, the diagnosis, what they mean, and what the medications can do, and what the side effects of these medications. And we are sort of called upon to self-educate. Now, for judges, I don't think that's any different than what we've had to do with the drugs that we don't want them to take. We've had to learn a lot about opiates, methamphetamine, how to make meth, because if they come up with certain kinds of things in the car, we know that's what they might be doing. Treatment work, what's the best way to do treatment, what are the evidence-based practices for treatment. And so in the criminal system, you have to learn those things for the drugs we don't want them to take. Our recommendation as an effective tool is that you have to self-educate. We do want them to take diagnoses that they do have. We have behaviors in the mental health system or in an AOT type court that would be considered completely inappropriate in a quote-unquote regular court. So people who are come into the courtroom, can't stand still, they're bouncing around, they're jumpy, you would automatically assume they were high in a criminal court situation. Or kind of sleepy and they're falling over. I mean, literally look like they're falling over, ready to pass out. Once again, we would assume that they were high. And, it would be considered a very bad behavior in our system of a non-AOT type system. People won't look at you. They can barely come up to the in front of the bench. They have hoodies on that they can't take off. Assume that they were lying to us because they won't look at us. And what I've learned is that in each of those situations, the guy that can't stand still, that's a side effect of the medication, or the anxiety level of the mental illness is so difficult for them that they just literally cannot stand still, and you have to accept that. Same with the person who's sleeping and falling over. They're not high because they're taking downers. They're high because the medication that they're giving that's been prescribed to them is making them look like they're just literally ready to fall over in court. Same with the people who can't look at you. Their illness is such that for them to look at you and engage you is so far beyond the realm of their ability that it's painful for them to do it. So they're not lying to you, and they're not high. These things that you learn when you go through, get a bit more information about some of these processes. Which we see frequently, of course, is in the face of overwhelming evidence that a person is seriously mentally ill, they just can't accept it. They just cannot believe that that is true, and they are having problems with their life, but that's not because they're mentally ill. I think for judges, that's one of the hardest things to accept, but it's in fact part of their illness, that they can be hospitalized repeatedly, and you can say to them, look, you've been hospitalized 4 times in the last 12 months, don't you think there might be a problem? They go, yeah, you know, not my problem. I'm a cyborg. I had a guy tell me, and he keeps getting to the hospital because he's a cyborg and interacts with other people, and he's a cyborg, and when I met him, he was still a cyborg, and doesn't accept that that's from the mental illness. We have to educate ourselves about the illnesses and the drugs. It can be just huge. These are very big drugs. Encourage them, obviously, to take these drugs, and have to know about them and the side effects. I had no formal training. I don't think that's necessary. You can learn a lot by reading. You can learn by talking to them. You will see certain patterns in the mentally ill, people who fight because they're hearing noises and they blame other people. Some believe that they are other people, and they're never somebody just a normal person. They're always somebody really fancy. They're a prophet, or they're the son of a prophet, or the son of celebrity. People who call 911 repeatedly, sometimes 5 and 6 times in a day. I can't remember why they did that. But you will start to see patterns, and it's important to recognize, I think, those are the patterns. It was to me to learn when I was talking to people who were hearing voices that I always kind of assumed it was sort of the voice of God. It would be a big booming voice saying, you are, whatever, you are a cyborg. And it isn't like that. They're muttering voices, they're whispering voices. We have a training program for judges where we ask them to put on virtual reality, get type headphones, and go lunch. And probably 90% of them had to take the headphones out before they even made it through the lunch line because it was distracting. So you understand when people are talking to you and they're hearing voices at the time, they have a hard time looking at you or paying attention to you because they are being distracted. Things that we can learn, and you can start to be, empathetic about it. The bad people, I've learned, it feels a lot like you're on steroids. If you've ever been given steroids for medication for yourself, you get this burst of energy. You can feel like you can leave all buildings. That's what they feel kind of as a regular basis. So you have to recognize that and accept the fact that they have these big plans. You're not going to talk them out of it. And I do think that is also very important to recognize that you meet where they are. You're not changing them. You're not going to convince them that they're not a cyborg. You just have to deal with them as you see them. The big issue is to talk to them about the hospital. Do you like the hospital? Do you want the hospital? I'm here to help you understand that we're going to try and keep you out of the hospital. This is not a moral judgment. If we want to discuss it, we talk about medicine as a brain programming reboot or a way of fixing a brain glitch that they have. And focus, again, is just you are who you are, but let's try and keep you out of the hospital. As people improve, sometimes we can actually talk about the illness. They can recognize that they have illness. I find that's always a boost. The other thing to recognize, I think, is a baseline. I didn't understand this when I first started. For some people, the best they get is still pretty sick. The best can be is their baseline, and they're not going to get beyond that. And we have to recognize that there are times when we're never going to have a really logical conversation with them. The baseline is pretty low, and we can accept and understand that. So I guess the first issue is to self-educate. We need to understand the psychiatric doses and the diagnoses and the medicines because we want to help them understand their diagnoses and medicines. We need to know what's going on because we need to help them know what's going on. We can't prescribe, and we need to tell them that too, but what we can do is help them understand, and in order to help them understand, I think number one is we have to understand. So that's for me now.
I know you're on for habit too.
Afternoon to all of you. I'm to be with you from a southern county in a deep southern state. We're very excited to be part of this program today, and we hope to learn more from the program than we can probably contribute. I'm pleased to be today with Jody Smith, our senior administrative assistant in our probate court. It was a wonderful job and who works very relentlessly at all these issues. And you're sitting with me, and also I have Krista Johnson, who is the court liaison from Alta Point with the mental health facility service in Baldwin, Mobile County, and Washington counties of southern Alabama. I mentioned in my brief introduction that Baldwin County is the fastest growing county in Alabama, and the top 10 right now fastest growing counties in the United States is the 500 plus cases. Because I think it's important for the listeners to understand that we're overwhelmed with a volume of mental issues in our county every day. All 50 states represented from retirees, and one of the reasons we know that is because as judge of Baldwin County, we have broad responsibilities, including all of the licensing. And through the licensing, we know through the use of car tax and driver's licenses, we have checks, and we're blessed to have all 50 represented in the county. We find also that it appears that to us, from probably a lay viewpoint, that a lot of people with mental issues will often move with family to a coastal area. So often moving in a coastal area with beautiful water resources in the Gulf of Mexico and the beautiful bays, somehow that's part of therapy. I agree with that because I spend a lot of time on the water, and water in its nature seems to be a helpful thing and helping in the side. My history is quite long in mental trend in the sense that the college freshman, one organization I was in, you had to do service time in the huge hospital we had in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, called hospital, and exposed at an early age to working with severely ill patients and consumers. It was challenging and of great interest to me. After college, a product of the Vietnam War, an Army officer, I was a 5th Army casualty officer for 16 states, and one of our responsibilities in the casualty General Corps were working with who had mental trauma, PTSD as we commonly know, from war, and we had a huge volume of those in the 16 state area. So I started at an early time in my life dealing with mental illness, and it's just always been something that always interests me and may want to try to improve the process and help these wonderful consumers that are just every day with their illness. My topic is understanding the issue that we have, develop a personal connection with the AOT participants. And that's one of the reasons I asked Jody and Chris me today, because we all as a team try to understand the consumer. Important in that, we think, is getting to know the family and friends. Obviously, as a judge, I can't do that for many reasons, but Jody and Krista can. And then in turn, help me in this very special program in a way that's a little of the normal judicial process, that they inform me as much as they possibly can about family and friends and the background of our concern. Obtain as much family history as we can. Jody and Krista try to do research as they can, often in a short period of time, as these come to us very quick sometimes. We understand the family dynamics. And all know family dynamics and the society today is a huge factor for all of us. We try to understand the support system, which only includes, if it's a younger consumer, the mother and father, or in many cases, grandparents or guardians. It's an older consumer, of course, spouse is extremely important in that support system. We try to learn as much as we can about them and involve them as we can in the support system. This part could also be, of course, a significant other. There's not a spouse. We also seek out anyone else who might be experienced with that consumer, anyone else that may have been involved in the mental health issues of that person. Helps us to move toward the diagnosis situation that comes about through the mental health experts. We are good listeners, and listening well is often a characteristic that most judges take pride in, because we do every day try to listen well, obviously as judges, because we're supposed to weigh the evidence from testimony in a court. Incidentally, mental health issues comprise about 20-25% of our court volume. I'll hear about 1,500 cases a year. In those 1,500 cases, about 300 will be mental commitments or recommitments. So it's your part of our court volume. Understanding the family and friends and understand connection with the AOT participants, we try knowledge of the environment and culture, and that's extremely important for judges and the health experts that are involved. We mentioned earlier some interesting things about hearing voices. In a courtroom, when I'm taking testimony, so often these issues come up, the voices, the mother voices, and I really don't understand how a can be hearing these voices and then speaking at the same time, when it's hard for me as a judge to just listen to the voices that are being presented in the courtroom. We understand the location in which a person lives. Brings some information to us, whether they're in a family household or have other active members in the family who they participate. We process it. Nothing ever fits in a box. It's constantly changing. Never are the same, as they say. So we try to look at trauma that's involved. And some of them have trauma. Some of them have serious criminal issues or civil that are facing them with civil liability and criminal liability issues. So that's something that is very important in that connection with the AOT participants. Unfortunately, my time is up in that issue, so I'll introduce the next section.
Well, you also have habit 3.
I'll now talk about understanding and clearly communicating the roles and responsibility of the AOT members. And the AOT team members, I'd like to run through those a little bit so that we all understand how in our county and in the state of Alabama that system works. Of course, we have the probate judge, and in my case, I'm the only judge in this county, 220,000, and I have other legal judges. So the full responsibility as judge falls on one judge in our county of 220,000 citizens. Fortunately, we have 6 wonderful court administrators, all who have some knowledge and some understanding of the AOT program. Primarily, the specialist is Jody Smith. Jody is a remarkable young lady with many years of experience in probate court, but specifically years of active court experience dealing with mental abuse. So without Jody, would not have a successful AOT program. She's remarkable. Moving to the mental experts, in Baldwin County, we have what we call the court liaison, and that's Thronson, who's here with me today. Chris has a master's degree level of education. It serves as a liaison with the court, the family members, the AOT program participants, and Alta Point, the large health facility that helps us. Alta Point, serving the counties, has 1,500 employees, many of which are mental experts with great capabilities. We have assigned to us an OT nurse. An OT nurse often is an RN, with the ability to understand and address the medicines that have been prescribed by the pharmacists that are available. We have many pharmacists that are available as the AOT who have special training mental illness needs for those areas. We have master's level therapists that work with us with each of the AOT patients and participants, and that therapist becomes very familiar with the AOT consumer. They follow that consumer from start to finish, and their role continues on long after the court is involved. We have a support team, and they provide assistance to the court liaison and those that are needed supporting what are called the case managers. These often train management people that help make all of the functions involved in the AOT program, to include things like transportation to the court if necessary, health issues, life issues that are involved. In some cases, may even get involved in food and clothing, where there are situations with our consumers that often don't have adequate clothing, or if they have the clothing, seem to want to guard the clothing. It's always fascinated me how many of our patients and consumers often feel that close to nature and discarding clothing is a part of their part of what is their in life of manifesting their illness. It's always been of interest to me in the area. We have the prescriber who with the AOT program, and in some specific cases, we're very fortunate to have full the psychiatrist involved that work directly in that AOT seeing patient. In Baldwin County, that our teams work 12-hour shifts from 9 to 9 p.m. Of course, that's 7 days a week, and they're, of course, compensated in a proper manner to meet all the legal requirements. Obviously, there are days on and days off, and they do all that. The court's not involved in that. We're very familiar with the staff and they have, and clearly communicate with them, understand all of their responsibilities, and they understand our responsibilities. We outside evaluation they're imposed. We try to be evaluated to make sure the program's working successfully. We encourage federal evaluation, and that comes about because they're federal dollars, and we're very thankful to all of you taxpayers in the day, because if you didn't pay your taxes, we wouldn't have the dollars to fund much in any program. We're very open to Medicaid examiners. We want them to AOT program and understand and clearly communicate with us of the responsibilities they see in the AOT program. So it's a whole effort and collaboration, working together. clearly communicating with everyone. Thank you much.
And we'll be describing habits 4 and 5.
Thank you. I agree with much of what Judge Russell has just discussed. Our role is, our program is a little bit differently set up, is based on a mental health court, a criminal mental health court, because I did that before, and partly because a lot of other duties, and some people are able to meet with their participants one-on-one, and I do not have time within my own docket to do that. So modeled on sort of a traditional, if you will, criminal mental health court, our services are provided by outside providers who are paid for by our AOT board and are not supervised by me. So my court, within my court, is just me and my court liaison who collects information. See our people at least initially every 2 weeks, and then after they get settled, up to 4, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, or 12 weeks. I see everybody at least once every 12 weeks. We have 40 people who appear in court. Participants have to go last, and they see the people who are struggling and the people who are doing well first. So I sit on the bench in a row. There are some differences of opinion on that, but for me, it's important that I am clearly a judge and clearly in charge of the courtroom. We have people who come in who want to speak, give speeches, or preach, and it's a little bit easier for me to control the court if I am in that particular seat. There are judges who sit at benches or sit at tables. They people in one, they have all the treatment providers there, and again, I just literally do not have time in my personal duties to be able to do that, because we have 97 people in my program right now. I chose this process because I wanted to emphasize that this is a court and that they participate as a civil commitment to me, the judge. And trying to do this and maximize what we call the Black Robe effect, which is a hallmark of our AOT program. We know that the Black Robe effect works. We have quantified it in our mental health courts for years. We are in the process of trying to quantify that for our particular court, but there have been national studies that show that judicial involvement can really change outcomes for people struggling to stay on medication for mental illness. I mentioned before, we have had an assisted outpatient treatment program for over 20 years, but there was no judicial supervision. And we were losing people, and people were sort of kind of rolling in and out of AOT without having a lot of supervision. So we believe that court intervention is significant and that it can have a long-term effect for people who struggle to stay on their medicine. And I think going to use judges to improve AOT outcomes, you have to meet people's expectations of what how a judge operates and how a courtroom operates. So it can be a bit intimidating. On the other hand, after people come into the court, see that I'm there on the bench and get up a little bit higher than them, then after that, nothing else feels the same as what most people would think is a traditional courtroom. I have a long background in therapeutic treatment courts, and it feels much more like that. Feeling about myself as a judge in this is that I'm more of a life coach than a judge. So my clear expectation is I'm going to be a judge, but once we start to talk, it's like a chat, and my job is to cajole you and to work with you. I agree with Judge Russell. We have a lot of people who like to get naked. They get naked in the court. They're expected to present themselves well. That is just part of being in court, and that's one of the reasons I foster a quote-unquote court environment. We get started. It's a very informal type of procedure. We do not make a record. There are no lawyers except in very rare instances where people bring a lawyer for a specific reason. Case managers are present, and there are also high-level staff members from the community service providers who can assist us if we need to make some appointments, move up appointments, make sure that people are getting medicine faster than maybe the system is allowing them to do that. I have a regular docket that's presented to me, and it's a very carefully annotated docket. So I know what they've been doing since I last saw them. I think it's really important because when they appear, they are nervous, and it's good for me to know what they've been dealing with if they have significant issues. And because they would say, well, how do you know that about me? Or how do you know that, about my situation? I like to say it's because I'm very interested in you. I'm paying attention to you. I want you to be successful. We want you to be happy. We want you to have the best possible life that you can have, and it's important for me to know these things about you. So those in the longest and who are doing the best go first. That's always told. If you're doing well, you're going to get out of here faster. The who are struggling go second, and then the newest people go last. And the reason we do that is so that everyone can see the successes of graduations. I agree with Judge Russell, being a good listener is a really important part about what we do, and we encourage them to speak. So I always say, tell me what's been happening with you, what you're doing. Each conversation is very, very personalized, and that's extremely important as well. Each one has a different situation. Each one brings with them whatever issues they might have, and you have to deal with those issues. Some of people who have trouble being in the courtroom, they don't have to come in until they're ready. Sometimes we have people who can't look at me. And I always say, you don't have to look at me. And then amazingly, they look at me. Once they're given permission not to look, then they seem to look. We want to approach them with a holistic recovery as our goal for them. Appearances are usually still pretty sick, but they can see that the people who are struggling look ill at times. And that's, I think, instructive for them because we're trying to move them towards the place where they don't look ill, where they're not preaching or wandering around or falling over because they're on too much medication. Do you want a job? Do you want to go to school? Do you want to have your own apartment? Let's talk about how you can get there, but let's recognize that you might have to take the medication. Too, that in many cases the people have struggled with the medication, struggled with side effects, and they never tell their doctor. So a lot of what we try to do is empower them to go to the doctor and say, look, I'm sleeping too much, or I have sexual dysfunction, or I'm getting rashes, I'm constipated, what issues are, because they can be treated, or perhaps the medication can be done down. So they're very forthcoming with us as judges, not always as forthcoming with their own doctors, and we are empowering them to have that kind of conversation. Case managers are in court. They are sometimes bringing the people. Our participants as family members. If family members are there, they're invited to come up, and we have clear expectations of them too. You have to tell us the truth. We want what's going on with you. You have to do what we say with the medication. Sometimes there's arguments about wanting to take the medication, and that's when I wear the judge hat and say, look, you're in this program. You have been civilly committed to me. You are unequivocally expected to participate in the medication part, and we're going to help you deal with your doctor so that you can get the good result that you want. We do graduate people, and when they graduate, we are asking them to make a commitment to continue to the medication because, again, it's a clear expectation of the court. The field is conversational. It is not adversarial, and we express a commitment as a community to support the individual in their recovery, which I think brings me to number 5, which is to the next slide, there we go, encourage them to actively engage in treatment with the goal of recovery and independence. So about a person who we just had, I'll call her Beth. She's moved back to Ohio after numerous problems in Texas and California because she believes that Julia Roberts, the celebrity star, owes her a great deal of money and that she has a personal relationship with Julia. And not just Julia, she also is owed money by a lot of businesses. Background, I think she sort of drove around looking for businesses and said, they owe me money too. It's not an uncommon type of illness. You'll meet a lot of people who think owed money by celebrities and other businesses. So use her as an example. She's pretty high functioning, but she believes that she's done architectural work and design work for Julia and these other people. What do we do with her? We accept the fact that she thinks she's money. I've encouraged her to think about letting a lawyer handle a lawsuit against Julia or all these other businesses. Never try to talk her out of it. Never say you're not an architect, although she is not. She is, in fact, a furniture and jewelry designer and was successful before she became ill. So what I try to do is reframe it and focus her on what do you want to do now. We have who are waiting on money from legacies from Chuck Shakur because he was their dad, Office Max because they designed their chairs They invented things for United Airlines. They have patents out there, and they're waiting on money. And in a situation like that, or any of the other situations that go, that's what I agree with you. You know, you're this money, but let's talk about what else is going on in your life. And I think it's really important to do that because nobody asks them after a certain point. They just become a patient. The focus is on their mental illness and not on necessarily the recovery. And who could blame the families? I mean, you have a person in your family who, you know, you're going to live an independent life, and suddenly they're back in the basement, and they won't come out of the basement, or whatever it is that's happening with them. So talk about how they want to see their future and how we can get them to their future. We've mentioned, of course, that we medication and seeing the doctor, discussing with the doctor their side effects and how they can be with. We want them to know that we don't want them to go to the hospital, that living their life is very inconvenienced if they have to go to the hospital, and really like going to the hospital, obviously. Some can't really remember it. It's a blur, or reasons as to how they ended up in the hospital or unclear to them. It's clear, however, that it was not their fault most of the time. They should have been there. And to help them understand that the purpose of this is just to keep them out of the hospital. And, you know, let lawyers deal with collecting the money or the business aspect of whatever they're doing, or they can preach right now. They can preach later, but they can't preach right now because we're going to talk about the use that what we have for them to live their best possible life. It's very important that the judges and the court personnel engage them on this. We empower them not only to speak to their doctors about side effects, but empower them to think about how they want to live their life and what is it that they see as the best possible life that they can have for themselves. Men feel that they have no power and that we, the system, or their family, don't understand them at all, that we therefore become the enemy. Like us, want to be understood. They want to feel that they are within their own lives, in charge of their own lives to the best of their ability. This is where I really also agree with Judge Russell, having family members come up. Sometimes they won't let the family member come up or speak, but if they're willing to do that, the family member can help you empower them, and you can empower the family member to say, you know, yeah, Eleanor is doing a great job over here, but she's struggling with housing. You know, she'd like to move out. We'd like to see her move out. We're not really sure how to go about that. That's where our case managers can be very, very helpful. We have vocational programs. We have housing programs, assisted housing programs. We can help them get as much independence as possible. I had people in my program who re-entered college, who are doing very well. Some of them are on the dean's list. We can use them as examples for the people standing before us to say, look, you're not limited. It's up to you to decide what you want to do and how limited you want to be. It's really down to you. We are cajolers, as I've said. Sometimes I miss being able to threaten people with jail. They don't do what I want them to do. But I can't do that anymore. I can only threaten them with hospitalization. And we're in life coaching, cajoling sorts of people. The thing I mentioned, which Judge Russell also touched on, is trauma. We have a lot of people who have been profoundly abused, many, many, many women, rape experiences or sexual assault experiences, and that needs to be addressed. They don't like to be around a lot of people. They really don't like to be around a lot of men. We do in our county have trauma-informed counseling. They have been a big advocate for both men and women to participate in that counseling, either in groups or one-on-one, because for a lot of our people, not only do they have the medical issues, they also have some behavioral issues that non-seriously mentally ill people can also experience. We have some veterans who, again, can seek services that are specialized for them who are veterans. I'll tell you, the joy of our program is when we have somebody stand up and say, you know, I finally realized that I am schizophrenic or I'm bipolar, and then I can feel better when I take medication. That is our goal. It's a big celebration when that happens. Other people get to see that celebration taking place. We currently have 90 people in our program. Since we started 2 years ago, we've had 170 people go through it. 14 have returned. Most recently, the last two, who just started last week, volunteered. I said, well, what happened? Why are you back? And they said, well, think it's because I stopped taking my medication. So that we define success, that they are involved, they are living their lives, they are working, they are living the best possible life for them, what their baseline is. If their baseline doesn't permit them to do that, then we can celebrate the fact that they just haven't been hospitalized. More importantly, I guess, in closing, we believe that our program works because the participants and their families are telling us that they believe in it. We're getting letters and emails from people who've been in our program, family members who've seen the program, find that the support that the court can give them with expectations of medical compliance is very helpful. We can be put in for 90 days initially and then up to 2 years. A couple people who are approaching the two-year place, and they haven't been hospitalized at all, which for these particular people is just incredible. Most people come in 90 days and are maybe 50% are continued for longer than 90 days, and a very small percentage are continued for up to 2 years. We're very proud of our program, and we feel by encouraging them in a personalized way to live their best life, we're helping them get that opportunity. Thank you.
Judge Russell will be covering Habit 6.
Wow, so much from George Delmer in such a short period of time. Judge, I hope that I can come and visit your court sometime. That's one of the beauties of these webinars is the opportunity that even the judges learn from other judges. And obviously, Judge Stormer is qualified in this area. So I'm interesting the numbers that she mentioned in the AOT program. We're 61 participants now in E1. I always like to kind of judge things based on the participants and what the background is, or something about them as best that I can tell. I will tell you we have more male than female, and we have a lot of middle-aged and a lot of young, and not so many old, but a lot of young people. I worry about mental health in America today because it seems to me that the growing number of countries that we have are so young and have had some trauma early in life, similar to what Judge Stormer spoke about. Leads to the concept that in our court we believe fully praising successes. We just do a little thing in our court each year where we have the students come in and learn about the judicial system, and they're so young and they're so interested to know a little bit about the court system. But one of the things that I like to focus on in our great democracy, in our great court system that we have in the United States, is the fact that everyone is treated equally. And that's the goal of every judge. Every good judge believes that our Constitution, the foundings of our great country are based on treatment to all of our citizens. And that equal treatment especially through in dealing with our mental consumers. So we believe that because we are all equal, that we all are responsible for treating everyone else the same, that we go the extra mile helping our mental consumers. So praise the successes. And we monitor that praise. I like to monitor the whole process of the AOT system. Of course, we like to think that we look at a one-year time period because we've just in the AOT program a little over a year, and that's a chance to look how successful we've been in that program and how we've discharged from the program who are leading what we would commonly call normal lives. Utilizing their medical, training, the medical support they have and the medical support they have to lead normal lives, achieving those educational accomplishments that George Stormer talked about. Some types of incentives throughout the program. And so that if they accomplish some goal, they achieve some element of success, they acknowledge some type of praise. We like to use the family member also along with the consumer, because we know that if that family member is praised for the success of the consumer, that family member will appreciate that. So often in the past they haven't been praised or thanked for what they have done along with the consumer. We like to praise them together and separately, because separately, of course, the family member or the support person of that consumer, you can talk very broadly in the court system, and I would hope in court systems about those issues that are important. Of course, respecting and honoring all the HIPAA laws that adhere to, but praising certainly and together. And one of the most beautiful things about the AOT program that we've seen is when of the consumer with the family member, and without the praise that's been extended to that, to the member and the family member. And as a senior court administrator with Jody, one of the things we like to do is praise the support system. And Krista and all the wonderful work that she does and staff and her team. We're under very tough schedules. We talked about the 12-hour shifts that they go under. They're best for them. We think they must do what's best for them because they continue to do it. It's hard to understand sometimes why that is special to them, but we have to praise them, praise their management team, and pass on praise to the management team and encourage them to compensate them in any way they can for the extra effort they have, and very special effort of helping our consumers. Praise, success, knowledge, faith, successes, no matter how incremental they are, how small they are, how large they are. Beautiful things to tell a person when you address us, to call their first name and recognize their name. Their name is special to each person. Since we do name changes in our courts, and I'm always asking those that come in for name change why they want a different name. But no matter what they take, it's always special to them that they're asking to take. So always remember that names are so important to our participants. Call them by their first name as much as you can. Praise every success that they have. Don't hesitate, as Judge Stormer does, and mentions very carefully to any weaknesses that come about. And when those weaknesses are resolved, when their failures are resolved, thank them and praise them and tell them how significantly important they are to the court system and to all of us. Thank you.
Mr. Stetton, covering Habit 7.
Thank you, Melissa, and I hope I'm sure everyone is as inspired as I am today by hearing from these two amazing AOT judges. I think they're great examples of the kind of judges who make these programs work and to how compassionate they are towards the people who these programs are designed to serve. And, that is the model of AOT that we hope people will way understanding. This is a concept that's sometimes misunderstood as a coercive program, as something that's sort of a, judge wagging their finger at people and forcing them to submit against their will to do things they don't want to do. And that's just not what these programs look like in reality. And I think you're really hearing that from our two judges today. These programs are very much about a court putting a hug around the people who come into this program, and of course the treatment team is really taking it from there and doing the same thing, and so that you have individuals who often come into these programs take off that they're being ordered to do something they don't want to do, and over time they come to feel the love. They come to realize, even if they don't start out initially wanting to be a part of this, that the judge cares about them, that all these people who are working on their treatment team to help them care about them, their life, and people have remarkable turnarounds under these programs. But of course, there is, in this last habit that we want to discuss, I think really gets to the fact that there is this AOT, that the court order also has to mean something, and that there needs to be a process in place to respond to situations that will inevitably occur when folks are not responding to the court order in the way that everyone had hoped at the time the order was put in place. And, so much of the education that my organization, the Treatment Advocacy Center, does around AOT around the country, we emphasize the fact that AOT is not meant to be a punitive proceeding at all. And part of making this tool work is to calm any fears that your participants may naturally feel about being in court. Many of them have had repeated negative experiences in court, both being committed to hospitals repeatedly and with the criminal justice system, and may understandably associate going to court with being in trouble. And we don't want people under AOT to feel that way at all. And so we remind them as often as is necessary that if things do go off track during the period of the court order to where it becomes apparent that the person is not in compliance with the order, which usually takes the form of not taking the medications consistently, and when the person is showing signs of decompensation, there will be a result, but that result is not going to be punishment, right? That is, we are not going to hold the person in contempt of court and put them in jail or levy fines against them for contempt. We're not going to detain the person and forcibly administer medication to them, as is sometimes necessary in an inpatient treatment context after certain findings have been made. We are not going to automatically recommit the person to the hospital without a finding that the person actually meets inpatient commitment criteria. We're not going to say it's a punishment for not doing what you were supposed to do under AOT, back to the hospital you go. And, in fact, under many of these state AOT laws, all of those potential punitive remedies to AOT non-adherence are explicitly prohibited by the statute. They are taken off the table. And even in those states where the statutes are silent on remedies, we discourage judges from taking those approaches. We think they're counter-therapeutic. And in fact, I know of no AOT programs anywhere in the U.S. that are set up that way. And, honestly, I've met a few judges in my travels who lose interest in this concept of AOT when they were told that these options to respond to non-compliance are off the table. As attorneys, we are conditioned to think of court orders and the court's contempt power as going hand in hand. So it's understandable that many judges think, well, you're telling me your court order, and now you've taken away the way I typically enforce court orders. You're talking about a court order with no teeth, so what's the point? And fair question to ask. However, I think that we ought to be careful not to get the misimpression that by taking punishment off the table as a response to the court order violation, we need to suggest that there should be no consequence to non-adherence. There absolutely must be procedures in place in your AOT court to ensure that when a person on AOT appears headed for a fall, things going well, don't wait around for something terrible to happen before we take action. We don't wait for the person to prove that they are dangerous to themselves or others by acting out in some way that may take a tragic form and may ensnare the person in the clutches of the criminal justice system. And, in fact, if you look at the one and only study that has ever found AOT to be ineffective, while I should say we have many that have found it to be effective and reduced harmful behaviors. The one study where the AOT didn't seem to work was in New York at Bellevue Hospital. This is prior to New York's creating Kendra's Law, and this program were very much taken into account when New York's AOT law, Kendra's Law, was designed, and we have these studies of Kendra's Law that show it worked well. But in that pilot program at Bellevue Hospital in the 90s, if you look at that study that showed that the AOT orders weren't really working, it's interesting because it really along with the fact that that particular program never developed an effective response to non-adherence to the court order, mainly because they could not get law enforcement to buy in and assist with the interventions that were necessary when people were going off track. And so through word of mouth, the participants in the program became aware that if at any point they stopped engaging in treatment, nothing would happen. They would basically just fall away and essentially just drift away from the program. That is not what you want to happen in your AOT court. So when is the appropriate non-punitive response to a person not following the court order? The specifics are going to vary depending on what your state law allows, and I'm happy to discuss your own state's law with anyone who gets in touch with me later. But basically, when the judge is informed that the patient is off his treatment and good faith efforts have been made to re-engage the person and they have failed, they ought to raise concern that it may be necessary to recommit the person to a hospital. And to determine whether that is actually necessary, the person will need a clinical evaluation. And so it becomes necessary at that point to, one, order that the person be picked up for short-term hold for an evaluation, and two, to schedule a hearing, or basically a modification hearing, to which the patient and treatment team will return to court and determine what is the appropriate next step based on what is found during evaluation that happens with the short-term hold. And the process for this is going to vary from state to state. In some states, the treating doctor can issue that pickup order independently. In other places, it's going to require an ex parte order from the court. But for present purposes, what's important to understand is that this procedure needs to be worked out in advance with other stakeholders, including a hospital or crisis center in your community that commits to holding these evaluations, hosting them, and also there needs to be a law enforcement partner that's going to be responsible for bringing the person in for that short-term hold. Ideally, that's going to be a mobile crisis outreach team or at least a CIT-trained officer who's able to handle this in a way that de-escalates any fear the person might have or anger the person might have. And establishing this process of how you're going to respond to noncompliance is really an essential part of setting up an AOT program. And as a judge presiding over the program, you need to have confidence that this is all taken place, this is all set up. So you can honestly say to the person who comes into your program, you know, if things go right here, you won't be in trouble, but we're going to take the steps necessary to protect you and help you. You know, I should point out that this kind of a process for bringing somebody in for an emergency evaluation, obviously this is something that can take place outside of an AOT order too, generally using the same laws. So AOT is not really adding much to the equation here in terms of your ability to bring people in. But what it is doing is it's setting things up so that that's actually likely to happen, because you have the person under very close monitoring, including by the court, more day-to-day by the treatment team, and so you are equipped to really be proactive and not just respond to some tragedy that might occur. And when the judge is making a determination of whether the standard has been met for this pickup order, I think it is appropriate to reach that point a little bit sooner with a little bit less showing of dramatic behavior in the community for someone who is under AOT than for someone who is not, simply because you already have a finding in place that this is someone who historically has really had negative consequences occur when they have failed to engage in treatment in the past. And so you have reason to think that if you let things go further down the string, that that's going to happen again. And so I would hope that a person under AOT be brought in for that evaluation just a little sooner than might otherwise have been possible. And of course, it's also possible when you do go through this process that you are going to find in the end that the person does not meet criteria for inpatient commitment and is entitled to be released. But the important thing to keep in mind is just this process, right? Just the having been brought in for evaluation, reconnected with the treatment team, had a serious conversation with the treatment team about what's going wrong, and then coming in and seeing the judge again. It reinforces upon them that things are not the way they've been before, that there are people who care about them who are watching closely to see that things go well. And it seemed to have an impact on behavior from research that we have. So that is my presentation on Habit 7.
All right, thank you so much. We're going to shift over into the Q&A portion. We've got roughly 15 minutes before the end of the presentation, and what we'll do is go through the questions that you've submitted in the Q&A pod. Feel free to continue to submit questions as we go along. If you need to direct the questions to a specific presenter, please make that clear. And, so I'm just going to dive into the list of questions we've already received. First of all, and this is for any of you presenters, what is the difference between AOT and mental health courts? Could AOT be considered a type of treatment court?
I would love to take that one.
Okay.
Okay, so thank you. I appreciate it because I would have liked to have gotten to that in my introduction, so I'm glad I have a chance now. AOT and mental health court are two similar concepts that I think really work well hand in hand, but it's important to understand the distinction. Mental health court is a criminal court. It is for individuals who are facing criminal charges and for whom the district attorney is able to make a determination that this person really needs treatment more than punishment, that if we get that person treatment in the community, they're unlikely to reoffend. And so that person is given an opportunity to have their charges set aside with the expectation that they will engage in community-based treatment, very much like the community-based treatment we have under AOT. And upon successful completion of a period of treatment, if the person has done what has been expected of them, those charges can then be dismissed, and the person will not have a criminal record and will not have to pay for their offense. And that is a wonderful program, and it's something that exists in many, many places across the country. It's certainly a tool in the toolbox that every community needs. But the important distinction here is that a crime is the price of admission to a mental health court. AOT is a purely civil response. It's taking place in a different type of court. It's in the court in your state hears civil commitments for mental health. Many places that's the probate court. In other places it's others. But it's not based on a criminal offense that has taken place first. So while many of the people who come into AOT will be, there's really not a very big difference in the populations who are served by these programs, because many people who come into AOT will have had many criminal charges in the past. We are not going to wait for a crime to be committed and somebody to be victimized and hope that the crime wasn't so serious that the person isn't even eligible for mental health court before we take action under AOT. So these are really two programs that I think every community should have in tandem, have both in place. And, it's not to say that there are never situations where it's appropriate to dismiss someone's criminal charges and move them into AOT. There are sometimes situations where the mental health court is not available to a particular person who would do very well under AOT, and, that's not something that I think we need to have an absolute Chinese wall between the two. But the important thing is that you should not have to commit a crime before you can get the help of a therapeutic justice court. That's where AOT comes in. But in terms of what kind of services people receive and how they interact with the court, pretty similar.
Okay. Another question that came in was, we have AOT in some of our jurisdictions, successful AOTs. However, in other jurisdictions, the state attorney or judges are not open. I'm interested in knowing, how long did it take to educate the state attorney or judges in your districts to support AOT, and what was your approach? And this one to any of the presenters.
Our fight over AOT in the drug court. So in 1995, when we proved that we could use a therapeutic treatment court of people with drug offenses, that's when we did our education. It's kind of flowed from there. So if the person in the question lives in a jurisdiction or a state where they have any therapeutic jurisprudence courts, I think it's a great springboard to sell AOT courts.
And Justice Sutton?
Well, Judge Russell here. Again, we've been in the AOT program just a little over a year. We have not had those issues at all. So I'm really kind of concerned as to what where it might have come from, and I'm really glad the questions come up because I guess we need to be aware that there could be those issues. But probate courts in Alabama are the totally responsible for the mental here, and we've not had issues at all in the area. And I'm really curious to know that may be an issue in some of the states, and something we might need to be aware of.
Was the person's issue that the district attorney in certain jurisdictions were not will along with this approach? Is that correctly?
We can explore that further, or if the person's still on the call, feel free to add more information in the Q&A box. But at this time, it just specifically talked about the judges and the state attorney.
Right. So state attorney, I assume that in their state, that person states that the prosecutor, or what's often called the district attorney, is they're called the state attorney. And, because of this distinction between AOT and mental health court, in a lot of places the prosecuting agency is not actually a party to these cases. That is, they don't not have to be the petitioner that brings them into court. It really comes down to who in that state brings hospital commitments. And if, in fact, it is the state attorney that's responsible for civil commitments, which is also true in many places as well, then there's no question that is an essential partner. And, we're going to have to bring them to see the value of this concept. And, I think what usually is the selling point there is the fact that these are individuals who we're seeing again and again popping up into the system. And the criminal justice system and the mental health system wants nothing more than to be able to serve lots of people efficiently. So to be able to address these folks' needs in a more consistent way is really to the benefit of the entire system. So the need for this approach is generally apparent to people who are dealing with this population again and again, bringing inpatient commitments repeatedly. And, we have to sit down with them and help them recognize that you're not going to have to do 6 inpatient commitments on this person in the next 2 years if we can get them under an AOT now. And we had to back that up.
Another question to the judges specifically, so Judge Russell and Stormer, what was the best resource for you in helping you learn or become more equipped to deal with mental health issues and assisted outpatient treatment?
Judge Russell here, I would give the credit to Chris Johnson and her staff at Alta Point with all the resources they have had to bring Odie Smith and me the information we needed to embrace the program and to complete to the program. It has just been so successful. And mentioned earlier about the repeated hospitalizations. And for AOT, I've had some patients in the last few years that have been in my court 5 times in a matter of just a few years. And it's just been so successful, and the AOT experts that Chris brought to us from the mental side have just been overwhelmingly supportive. So special thanks goes to them.
I was not like Judge Russell, interested from an early age. I was a psychology major. I think you really have to be those things. I think you just have to be interested. There's a lot of literature out there. There's a great book called, and I think it's still in print, I'm Not Sick and I Don't Need Help, which was very helpful to me to understand why people don't understand they're mentally ill. The Drug Court Professionals Organization has expanded to include all specialty courts in the criminal justice system. They now include mental health court training in there. So if you have access to their website, it can tell you where they're doing the trainings, and they do include mental health court. Even if you do AOT, it's the same issues that are presented in terms of how people behave. I also go to psychiatric ground rounds from our hospitals when I can. There's an awful lot of stuff on the internet in terms of learning about it. And frankly, I learned a whole lot from just talking to my people. What's working, what isn't, what do you mean? They get mouth movements and side effects that I wouldn't have expected. They're very educational as well. So there's a lot out there, I think, if you're interested.
Final question. We've only got a few more minutes. So this is more of kind of a case question, but, Judge Stormer and Judge Russell maybe take this question as an example and answer in how you might handle the situation. The person asks, what can you do for a person with many hospitalizations who are finally stabilized but are now unmotivated to seek a life beyond their serious mental illness at 50 years of age? What would you do?
Good question, and it's something that we ponder on and struggle with all the time. When lose the commitment to we struggle to be quite truthful, and those of you that are listening will have some ideas to share us in the future. But we just have to be persistent, and we just have to keep working, and we just keep striving, because when you think about it, this program is last resort, the last opportunity for them to have an achievement in their life where they will not be hospitalized again. So we don't accept no. We just continue on as a team, working together with the mental health experts to make sure that there's someone there to support them and this program continues on. So it's an excellent question. I'll be anxious to hear what Judge Stormer answers.
I try to engage them on one thing that they like to do. And for some people, their life in their basement is their best possible life, because it's very hard for them to go and be around other people. It's just too difficult. And for those of us who are like me, an extrovert, I really understand it, but I accept that what they tell me is true. They just can't go out and be around other people. In that instance, I encourage them to get library cards and make kind of mandatory they get a library card, because it gives them access to a larger world, and they have to leave the house. They get free movies, free books, free games if they're into video games. And I also know that for myself, helping other people gives me a lot of satisfaction, and I know that that's true for people in my program. So if they are able to get out, I say just pick one thing that you're going to do that's for somebody else. It doesn't matter. You walk your neighbor's dog, go talk to somebody else, try to participate in one activity that's not about you. Actually had pretty good results. If I can get them to do one thing for somebody else, they start to realize, gee, there's a larger world out here and I can participate in it. So library cards are great for those who can't leave, and one activity for somebody else seems to work for others.
So much. So at the end of our time now, for all of you who submitted questions that we did not get to, please rest assured that we will be taking your questions and putting answers to them. The GAIN Center is delivering technical assistance to AOT programs and can work with Brian Stetton and our other consultants to answer all of these questions. So look forward to getting information related to all of your questions in the future. We'll also be sending out a handout related to this webinar and the slides for this webinar. So thank you so much to all of the panelists, to Mr. Stetton, Judge Russell, Judge Stormer. We really appreciate all of the information you shared with us today.
Thank you, and thanks to everyone who listened to it. It was my pleasure.
All right, well, we will bring this to a close. Good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you.